Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Jonny Baseball, oh god.
Here's Jonny Baseball.
Hello again, it's John here. Does anyone know what a Philly is? Philly is slang for Philadelphia, so are they the Philadelphia Philadelphias? I got a lot of good feedback on my first video. I appreciate everybody for letting me know what I could improve on. One thing they mentioned was to ditch the Mets hat, and as you can see, not a Mets hat. I don't want to alienate any viewers, so I felt like the safest pick was to go with a team that no longer is in existence and will never be again. Another piece of feedback I got was to spice up my background. So as you can see, we have a very exciting light display going on here that you can enjoy instead of looking at my face. And also somebody mentioned that I should pep up my energy levels, so here I am, baby. I'm a man of the people, so if there's anything you want out of me going forward, just let me know. Animal cruelty is off limits. Other than that, I'm pretty much game for anything. So this is the first in a 30-part segment where I'll be going to all 30 MLB teams and talking about 3 players from each team that I think you should keep an eye on in your drafts this year. These aren't sleepers, strictly speaking, but they are guys that I think are the 3 most undervalued guys on each team. So really what I'm looking at here is how guys are likely going to be drafted and where I think you could extract some excess value. So we're going to start off with the most exciting team in baseball, obviously, the Philadelphia Phillies. I'm going to save the best for first. Yeah, I'm going to change it up a little bit on you. I think the player with the most potential going into this season on the Phillies is Tommy Joseph. I don't just like him because he looks like a hungry hippo. Probably has a great personality as well. I have a sixth sense for these things. Now that the bloated corpse of Ryan Howard is no longer occupying first base for the Phillies, Tommy Joseph is going to get his chance, and I like what I saw last year from the guy. Among players with at least 250 plate appearances, he was 65th in hard hit percentage, which I know doesn't sound that great. You take into consideration the fact that he's ahead of guys like Pujols, Andrew McCutchen, Adrian Beltre, Nelson Cruz. There's some sluggers that are going to be going in the first couple rounds in most drafts, and I think you can get similar production out of Tommy Joseph for a marginal fraction of the cost, so I think he's a guy to definitely be targeting. Some things to note: he had an 18.9% home run per fly ball last year, which is obviously inflated. The league average is usually around 10% or so. Did hit 45% of the balls he made contact with in the air, which when you're hitting it as hard as he is, bodes very well for carrying an inflated home run per fly ball. So I think the power is legit. He's definitely at risk of a little bit of regression, but I still, just based on the size of his frame and the fact that he hits the ball hard and in the air so often, I think you're going to get a lot of power out of him. Even though he hits the ball in the air a lot, he also hits the ball on the ground at a below league average rate, which is a good thing when you're Tommy Joseph, a man who looks and probably runs as fast as a potato. His BABIP was below average at 267. Obviously it's going to be low because, like I said, he's not the most fleet of foot dude out there. He did manage to have a below average BABIP and still carry a 257 average, which is not going to kill your team. Most importantly, Tommy Joseph is a guy I was following throughout a large percentage of last year, and in the second half he seemed to really figure things out. He seemed to struggle a bit in the beginning. Part of it might have been inconsistent playing time because they were playing Ryan Howard against righties for the most part. In the first 2 months of the year, May and June, he had strikeout percentages of 30% and 24% respectively, which is horrid. And he ran up walk percentages of 2.5% and 2.1% in those months, which is also hard. However, over the next 3 months, he managed to quadruple his walk rate, shot up to 10%, which is very good. You're looking at, over the course of a full season, like 60 plus walks if he manages to maintain that rate, which for a guy who plays in an OBP league, like, very nice. I'm not saying that's necessarily his true talent level, but the fact that he started at such a low point at 2% with his walk rates, managed to improve that to around between 8 and 10% over the final half, is really encouraging. Perhaps even more encouraging is that strikeout rate essentially got cut in half as well. He was posting a K percentage of around 15% in July and September, which is unbelievable. Quite frankly, a 15% strikeout percentage is elite, and when you pair it with the capability for power that he has and hopefully an improved eye at the plate, I think this guy has the potential to be a monster, especially because I think they're going to be slotting him in to the run-producing slots in the lineup, like 3 through 5. So I think there's going to be a lot of RBI opportunities coming this year, and I think the Phillies are going to be an improved team, to be honest. So there might be some potential to fill in the box score. I think Joseph could really break out this year. My prediction for him over the course of a full healthy season is probably 265 average. I could see him hitting more than 30 home runs, but I think 30 home runs is a good target, and depending on his place in the lineup and how good the guys around him produce, I could see upwards of 80 RBIs, which for a guy that's going to be going late in drafts is a steal. So keep an eye out for Tommy Joseph. So next up, player number 2 is Cesar Hernandez, possibly one of the most boringly named players on the Phillies. Cesar Hernandez was a guy who had a pretty nice finish to 2015. I think he was on a lot of sleeper lists last year, but coming into 2016, over the first few months, he had a similar situation to Tommy Joseph, actually. He didn't seem to be able to put it together over those first couple months. And I think when he started off so slow, a lot of the people who had owned him just cut bait and forgot about him for the rest of the year, and I can't really blame them. For the first 3 months of the season, he had 3 steals and 5 caught stealings,
which is pathetic.
And over the last 3.5 months or so, he really picked it up. The dude crushed the ball. He hit well above 300 for that final half, and he managed to rack up 14 steals during that time, which essentially put him on a pace for like 25 to 30, which is what you wanted from him when you drafted him. Now, I don't know if the first half of last year was more due to injury or him kind of finding his way, but I really like Cesar Hernandez's profile. He's a guy who doesn't strike out a lot. He walks a bunch, which is huge for a guy who depends on his legs, because the more he's on base, the more chances he has at stealing you some bags. As a late draft option, I think this is a guy where you could extract a lot of value from. I could see this guy going undrafted in some leagues. I see him going in the final round. I could see him going for $1 in options. And again, over the course of a full healthy season, I think this is somebody who could get you 30 steals, an average around 290 or 300, which is solid, especially in this day and age where stolen bases are kind of on the decline. Getting 30 steals out of a middle infield spot and out of a guy who doesn't hurt your average is killer. I mean, you couldn't ask for more. So Cesar Hernandez, keep an eye out. There are so many options for this last spot. I mean, the Phillies are just a totally stacked team that's going to take the division by storm, but ultimately, I had to give the spot to my boy, Jared Eichhoff. Eichhoff was a bit of a sleeper going into last year, and he actually had a really good year. He had a 3.65 ERA. His control was impeccable. Didn't strike out a ton of guys, but he gave you enough Ks. He had around a 7.5 K per 9, which is more than passable in this day and age. It had an amazing whip, 1.15. And yet despite all that, I think this guy is going to be undervalued in drafts, and again, it might be because he has a pretty less than stellar name. I just think a lot of people are going to write the Phillies off and overlook a lot of their players, and Jared Eichhoff is one of them, despite the fact that he had a really good year. I also think there's a lot of room for growth with this guy. Looking at some of his pitch FX stats, I mean, that curve is nasty. I remember watching a Mets game where he just threw something like 60% curveballs and nobody could hit that thing.
It's filthy. That curve is filthy.
They got to bring in a hazmat team every time he throws one to remove the ball from play, because it's a health hazard. I love this guy's pitch mix. He's not the kind of guy who throws 50% fastballs and then mixes in his other pitches, which is a good thing because I don't think he has a very good fastball. He manages to throw his curve and his slider 40% of the time, which is great. The more looks you give guys, the more you got to keep guys guessing, the more off balance they're going to be. And I think that those two pitches, I mean, just based on the data, are excellent. The slider has a 65% contact rate, which is great. And the curve has a 61.9 contact rate, which is excellent. There's obviously things he needs to work on. I think his two-seam fastball, he just needs to scrap. It looks like that's the pitch that gave him the most trouble in terms of contact rate and home runs. So if he can improve that pitch, or if he can just scrap it entirely and just work in his normal ho-hum fastball with his curve and his slider, which are above average, I think he'll be in good shape. I also think he needs to can the changeup. He didn't throw too many of them, but that's probably because the ones he did through got deposited into the Poughkeepsie. Is the Poughkeepsie in Philly? All right, his changeup is no good at all. He just needs to get rid of that changeup. But if he sticks with the pitches that work for him, I think there's a lot of potential for this guy to become a really good pitcher. And like I said, I think this Philly offense is going to be much improved this year. So I think you're going to see more run support. And I think you're just going to see a better line from this guy. So I think despite the fact that he had a pretty good year, I think this is somebody who is going to go under the radar. You might have to pay a little bit for him, but I think that he definitely is going to create value for you. So my prediction for Eichhoff for this year, I would say, conservative estimate, 3.5 ERA. I think he can easily give you a 1.15 whip again, especially if he hones his pitches even further. He has a little bit more experience this year. I think that's something to consider. And I think if those pitches do improve and he scraps the ones that don't work for him, he could bump his K/9 up above 8. So what you got there is a really solid, number 3 pitcher in most fantasy rotations. So, and I think you would have to pay like the price of a number 5. So he's a steal at that price. So that's it, my 3 high-power Phillies.
Get your Phillies here, get your Phillies.
There you have it, 3 Phillies to fill out your fantasy team. Fill out, get it? Like I said, this is going to be the first of 30 videos about 3 players from each team that I think you should pick up. Check in a couple days for the next one. If you have suggestions on a team you'd like me to cover, hit me up in the comments or on Twitter or on email, or send me a carrier pigeon. Thanks again for tuning in. If you have any other suggestions for how I can improve this channel, shoot them at me. I'm here to make you happy.
I'm here to make you love me.
Love you guys for stopping by. Best of luck, and I'll see you guys in a bit.